welcome partner, consumer, tech, and media practice at McKinsey & Company and Quantum Black, Jamie Vickers.
Hello, everybody. So welcome to Sundance. Welcome to Adobe House. Welcome to today's discussion on AI in modern production. I'm grateful today to be joined by a really amazing group of panelists, Hannah Elsakr, Sean Bailey, and Maha Dakhil. First up, I think none of these people really need introduction, but Hannah Elsakr is VP of new GenAI businesses at Adobe. That means she's responsible for all of the scaling of products like Firefly in the enterprise and other creative tools. So let's hear it for Hannah. Next up, Sean Bailey is the CEO and co-founder of B5 Studios. He's also the former president of Disney Motion Pictures Production. And if that weren't enough, he is vice chair of the Sundance Institute. So Sean, please come to the stage. And finally, Maha is managing partner at CAA and also the motion picture agent to many of the world's largest and most successful A-list directors, writers, and talent. So Maha, please come to the stage as well. So, focus of today's discussion is going to be AI, but we thought we'd start with really a sort of human moment and a human story. So maybe to begin, I might ask if each of you, maybe we start with Hannah, could just share a moment where, recently you've been impressed by the power of human storytelling.
I mean, maybe this is a little trite, like all storytelling is human. So whether we're talking about AI or, more traditional storytelling, I'll give you a couple. We just had our own conference a couple months ago called Adobe Max, so hopefully some of you came by there. But we worked with some really innovative storytellers, some who are in the room, to do a whole series of AI shorts that were inspired, so that was really fun. And then what I love about Sundance is all the stories that need a voice. You guys do such a great job to make sure there's such diversity in the stories told. We just saw this morning a very compelling one called The American Doctor. Tough material, but it's material we need to all see and digest. So that's one.
Sean?
Well, I guess since we're here, Maha and I last night were at the tribute to Robert Redford, and it was a lovely night, and to see what he built outside of the system, and the voices that he empowered, and to see people like Chloe Zhao and David Lowery and Ryan Coogler, and I guess I thought in particular, I'm a big Sinners fan, and so to think about Ryan, starting here in the labs. And then the day prior, then obviously through, from Fruitvale to Creed to Black Panther to Sinners. And for the day prior, for that Sinners to be nominated for 16 Academy Awards, more than any in the history of the Academy Awards, it just really showed me the power of new storytellers emerging and why it matters. And to have a wholly original voice like Ryan's, at the height of his powers was really amazing for me.
I'm still under the spell of last night, too. It was so emotional, so incredibly beautiful. And to see, I was saying to Sean last night, we have probably 1,000 ideas running through our brain at any given moment. And I'm sure Sundance was a quick flash in Robert Redford's mind. And then to take that and execute it, and for us all to be here today is quite special. In terms of inspiration, I don't have to look further than my own clients. So just in the last week, Oscar-nominated movies like Hamnet and Begonia. I'm so inspired to see a woman like Chloe Zhao, Chinese woman, interpreting Shakespeare in a completely different way with Steven Spielberg and Sam Mendes by her side as producers, Yorgos Lanthimos, a Greek filmmaker who, I don't think AI could ever compete with this originality. We'll get to that, but he made this movie Begonia based on an original Korean film, and so I'm very inspired by their storytelling.
Fantastic. And Sean, I want to start with a question for you. So you've overseen many of the biggest technological shifts in film production. AI seems kind of early. Where are you seeing that already changing aspects of film production? And where do you think it's really just sort of experimentation mode?
Well, I think at the IMAX 4K, it's not ready for prime time yet. I think you're seeing two things happening, which is sort of the bigger companies trying to experiment with where they can augment, where they can support sort of the existing structures, and then I think you're seeing a lot of exciting people kind of coming the other way. saying, hey, we're going completely native. And I don't think yet it's at a place where, the studios face a lot of challenges. They have marketplace headwinds, as we know. Costs of movies only continues to go up while revenue is flat or declining. You're losing a lot of international markets or having a harder time performing in international markets. So I think they know that they really need to sort of reevaluate the traditional systems, traditional distribution, traditional pipelines. But it's going to be tricky. They have classic innovators' dilemma problems, and they have a lot of structural issues to navigate. So they're trying, but it's going to be quite difficult.
Are there areas where you think they have a good chance to succeed? I guess they're well positioned to invest, but on the flip side, if they've got £1 million per minute of production versus an AI native studio with £10,000 per minute, very different structural dynamics at play.
I think they're going to have to really work with the entire ecosystem. They're going to have to really bring in creative talent. They're going to have to really work with the tech community. I think it's going to require everybody having a seat at the table to get it right. I think that they have to sort of accept that some of this change is inevitable, and to just sort of try to ignore or defy isn't going to be successful. So I think we kind of have to do a great job as the Hollywood ecosystem of leading into the future, but we have to really work with our partners and partners who share the same values, partners like, honestly, Hannah at Adobe, to figure out what the world looks like going forward. Because I think there's going to be a moment where there's what has been and then what will be.
One thing we've discussed a lot is whether you're a large global studio or an independent filmmaker, the math is the math. And the math problem is the same. And I've talked to independent filmmakers who said, I couldn't get in the door, I couldn't get the economics to work, but AI has completely changed how I do previs, how I do post, how I save time. And of course, you've worked on $100 million budget films. It's the same math problem, compounded by the fact that theatrical audience, we have a different pattern now. And so you really have to think very hard about time to screen and how you're thinking about the economics. So I actually think on any scale, it's going to help the economics of getting film made.
And Maha, I guess that's quite a good segue on the topic of just engaging the full ecosystem. You work with just many of the world's top talent. How are they thinking and feeling about AI, and what's it going to take for them to feel confident engaging with it constructively?
I mean, I can't speak for every single artist we represent because obviously they're also original and they're thinking and how they want to approach this. But I think our responsibility is to make sure that choice for them, whether they want to opt in or opt out, is completely present, just the way every single tool you can opt in or opt out on. I think that what is probably frightening to them is the idea of the inevitability of it. That takes our agency away from all of us, and I would say for all of us who are excited or interested about it or skeptical about it, it's not a foregone conclusion the way it's being told to us that it's inevitable. It is a tool. We have to be really, really vigilant about making sure that this tool is not adopted quickly just because big tech is in a race with each other. We need to fight for our seat at the table to make sure that we're part of shaping this conversation. The healthiest way for this tool to be integrated is to be integrated ethically and slowly. And so at CAA, for example, we are talking to every single major tech company out there. We want to know everything and everybody, but we're going to be very discerning about who we're going to put our artists in front of and actually endorse the way we've done with Hannah and with Adobe, because they've passed our purity test to a real degree.
And are there any sort of anecdotes on working with talent? I mean, you shared a few in the green room just before. Like, how can tech companies sort of help make creators feel
I do whatever
comfortable?
Sean and Maha coach me to do. Look, we've talked about this. A lot of it is an education gap. So all of you in the room are probably way deeper than the average person on, what is the nutrition value of the tech, the models, how do you use it, what's my behind the scenes. But I think what both Sean and Maha have done is create space to have conversations. And it's not about taking away choice, because I think different talent have different comfort zones. But our job here is to say, this is what is possible. Here's the education. And if you want to meet with a PhD, we'll bring in a PhD so they can tell you what's really going on with the bits and bytes. But I feel like that has opened up a lot of conversation where the possibilities of new monetization models for film and for talent is the power of where we should take this. But that requires agency.
I guess I would just add, I get that there's some concern, and I do believe some jobs will change, but I also think there's a lot of reasons to be tremendously optimistic and excited about what the future holds. I mean, Hannah and I talk about a lot. If you can change sort of the risk calculus, I mean, basically every studio has been assessing movies and series because we've used the same methodology for a very long time. And so that's why you get this, at the biggest levels, this very sort of, heavy-handed risk management. And I think all of a sudden, if you can sort of change these processes and these cost structures, you can have people make more. You can have people make more daring, ambitious things. And so I think there's a reason to be tremendously excited about a creative renaissance that could come about.
Does that tie into how you're thinking about things at B5 Studios? I don't know how much you can share now, but...
Very much. We have a couple of notable filmmakers who have come to us and sort of said, this is the movie I've always wanted to make for 15 years. And the Hollywood system as it exists, I've not been able to get it done. Can we talk about it? And I think if I look at what I think our first 3 or 4 movies will be, they are all movies that for various reasons otherwise would not exist in the current calculus of Hollywood.
Fantastic. And Maha, were you going to add?
Well, I was just going to say, on that note, you're always going to get me. If you democratize something and allow for new voices, diverse voices, people who don't have the economic access or any access to be able to make things and bring their thinking into the landscape, I'm really supportive of that. But again, I think it has to be done ethically. It has to be done with the an artist-first mentality, and we haven't seen that by and large. So we're very, very skeptical about that. And again, going back to the inevitability, I think there's so many reasons to be optimistic. There's so many reasons to be skeptical. I don't think any of us like to be out of control. We want to be part of shaping it. And we're right now at that point where this is the conversation, it's live, and it's going to change so drastically. What we're talking about and saying to each other about this is going to change tenfold in the next few months, and a year from now this conversation won't be relevant to anybody. But what I do believe is we have to be involved in it, and we have to help be co-architects of it. We're not the creators of it. My specialty is not tech or AI, but my specialty is artistry and originality and the protection of artists.
Some of the artists that we've talked through together have said, you've unlocked my sketchbook. And there's lots of different ways to say this, but I'm working on a film. I don't have 2 years to take off and do this animation project that I've always wanted, or I have 100 characters in my sketchbook and I haven't had time to develop them. And this is where I think the use of responsible AI is accelerating them tremendously through these processes. So it's kind of fun to watch and be part of.
I would add just one other thing put the Sundance hat on for a minute, which is I met with a filmmaker after a very successful premiere of their film here 7-8 years ago, and was talking with the filmmaker and sort of thinking what might be appropriate at our studio. And it was a small, kind of gritty drama. And the filmmaker said, look, I'm very grateful that I got to make this movie. And I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the people who fund it. He said, but this was the only movie anybody would let me make. It's the only movie I could afford to make. He's like, I want to be Spielberg or Zemeckis. Like, I want to come out, I want to swing at that level. And I think there's reason to think that filmmaker 5 years from now, maybe they're showing up with a District 9 or an Arrival, that all of a sudden they can do something to the democratization that, historically, their voice, how they wanted to express it, they weren't able to.
And I think if we take this theme of reasons to be optimistic, reasons to be skeptical, Sean, if we just talk about the technology for a moment, where do you think it's already mature enough to be actually making a difference and used in production workflows? Where do we still need sort of major breakthroughs for that to start having a sort of meaningful impact?
I mean, I think the places, from storyboarding to pre-visualization to visual effects, I think we're starting to see a real impact there. I think you're starting to see, animation, Bryn's here, and there are a lot of companies that are doing some exciting stuff there. I think that what we ultimately may see is sort of timelines really change. I think the notion of sort of workflows being really linear, that, hey, I've got an idea, and I got to put it on a screenplay, and then I've got to go into pre-production, and then I'm going to go shoot and hope I get it right. Now, because that's where most of the capital and resources are deployed. Then I got to come do the best I can in post. I think we're going to see a real blurring of how all that works, and I think that's going to be really exciting, because I think a lot of people focus a lot on cost reduction, and I think about the beginnings of Pixar, and part of the reason the Pixar movies were so good was not just because they had a bunch of geniuses around the table, which helps, it turns out, but also they got to iterate. They got to look at their movies multiple times. And you had a bunch of really smart people having the opportunity to really work the movie and have the discipline to make it creatively great. And I think there's some really, I think, as I said, another reason for optimism, I think overall quality may go up significantly.
Maha?
I was going to say, in general, I think, being optimistic about something or being pessimistic about something doesn't change the outcome. It's just your outlook about it. And so I just think you have to be an activist about this. You can't be optimistic or pessimistic. You have to be a part of it because we're the pioneers. We can sit back and let it all happen, and it could be in the hands of good faith actors. It could be in the hands of bad faith actors. But those of us who care about these outcomes have to really involve ourselves in them and shape them. So I think, there's something very passive to me about optimism and pessimism on this subject. I think we have to really be engaged, and it's an exciting time because nothing's in stone right now. You see when OpenAI made that announcement, and that's really when everyone in our industry realized, oh, it really is here, and we don't like this. A couple days later, because of all the pressure behind closed doors, or frankly, a lack of dialogue, maybe if you want to give people benefit of the doubt, we're not talking to each other enough. There's a huge mistrust between tech and Hollywood, and it's left this chasm that's allowed for this. We're playing catch up. We're all trying to meet each other now and say, hey, don't forget the artists. Don't replace the artists. So I really do think that, like anything, I think if you pack this down to simple dialogue, I think we're going to have a lot of more to be optimistic about.
I just want to echo. I think engagement is critical because what I don't think we want to do this. This is new, but it's not entirely new. If we think about, when Steven Lisberger made Tron in 1982, he's basically the first to use computers in a studio movie. They submitted the movie to the Academy for Best Special Effects, and the Academy said, well, you use computers, and that's cheating, so therefore you're not eligible, right? Now we look at the world today. After Tron, there's a young animator at Disney Animation named John Lasseter, who goes to the more senior people there who are doing hand-drawn animation, and he says, maybe we should look at using computers. And they say, that's heretical, and he's out of a job pretty soon, and he has to go up north and find Ed Catmull and get funded by George Lucas and Steve Jobs to then go create Pixar. And so I think we don't want to be in the, hey, we can't talk about it place. So I think engagement, dialogue, and honesty is really important.
And we've been, I just want to repeat, we've been at these tectonic shifts before. You share this story about Pixar and even how there was picketing outside Pixar. The first 3D movies have been made. But over time, you've seen, actually more and more animators have been entering into the craft. Same thing happened with Photoshop. In the 90s, when we launched Photoshop, we're very comfortable with that idea of pushing pixel now. And I think we had a lot of craftspeople who were upset at the time in the 90s and called us. It's about having real artists stand behind it. At that time with Photoshop, it was David Hockney who stood up and did creative jams with us. Obviously now we all know him, and digital art is a real art form. I think we'll see the same thing with always human vision at the center, but AI as a tool in the storytelling. We're seeing that even with films here. I think there's a stat that says 85% of the premieres at Sundance have used an Adobe tool in the system. Many of them are using things like Firefly boards, which is an endless canvas of ideation. Back to where do you get started? I need to ideate and I need to do it faster. So you are seeing people lean into this. So we've been here before, but it's going to take this dialogue, and weighing the pros and cons of all those things.
And that's actually quite a good segue into, what are the things you're learning just through the Adobe experimentation? What are your tools being used for? What's the feedback you're getting? How do you bring that into your sort of product development?
So, we are really honored to have been part of award-winning filmmaking for decades now. And so I know there's a very famous phrase called fix it in post. I think with AI, we should think about fix it in pre, and maybe shorten how much folks are having to scrunch in post. But if you think about just the storytelling mechanism, whether it's for an advert, a 40-second promo, a 30-second promo, or a theatrical release of Tron, the process is pretty much the same. You need a brief, you need to create a vision understood and signed off, right? You need all those scenes and the storyboards done. You move into production on site, and then there's post and finishing and coloring and all of those, color grading. I think I'm going where Sean's going, which is the concept, the pitching, the concept, the boards, no brainer. If you're not doing that, I feel like you should be doing that. I'll save you. The post, Jama, one of our good friends, told me 50% of the VFX is what he calls silly VFX. It's like, I didn't have the rights to that poster, or a boom is sitting here and somebody's rotoscoping for hours and hours. Yes, AI, responsible AI can help you with that, right? So start there, because that's where a lot of time and probably tension is happening. The on-site dailies, this is where I think we need to talk more. Media intelligence from an AI perspective is really interesting. Hours and hours of dailies. We're going through those by hand, manually. Can we find the same shot that we want from all the angles in the bin rather than manually finding it? Yes, we can. So I think you'll teach us, and that's part of the dialogue, is how do you want to go at this? For sure, the pre and the VFX are no-brainers at this point.
And I love this concept of fix it in pre, and I even saw the
New
beanie
t-shirts.
hats downstairs
Yeah.
and the t-shirts. And could you give a few examples of what, in practice, fixing it in pre kind of looks like?
Well, if you think about filmmaking, I view it as traditionally very linear, in a sense, and we can talk about the Pixar. You know, we know folks who were deep in running those films for the ones we all love. It is linear, and so if a scene doesn't get greenlit, you've got engineers, animators, finishing people waiting and not doing anything until you go back and fix that scene and get it greenlit. That takes 8 to 12 weeks in a traditional method. What if you could go away, work the story concept, use a responsible AI model to help you with the storyline and get that greenlit? Otherwise, you are going to have a problem down. And the schedule, you can see all their scheduling charts that all of a sudden spikes and everyone's working overtime because they can't finish the film. So I think that is the basic concept. Not all of us are visual the way the director and the visionaries are. So helping everyone see what the vision is earlier in the project, I just feel like aligns us better.
And Sean, I guess that connects a bit to what you were saying earlier about, you know, development, physical production, and post-production sort of collapsing a bit into one less linear production workflow. Could you share a bit more on how you see that developing?
Yeah, I think one thing also that at least in our experience that used to frustrate me endlessly was we'd hire one team of people to do storyboards on a movie. That team would hand off to a previs team. They would then do previs of really just the big sequences normally. That previs team, and I would hand off to then the VFX house, and I'd say, well, wait, but didn't we build some assets for the previs team? Why are we paying for the VFX house to now rebuild everything we just already did? And why can't be the same group of people who understand what the director creatively wants? Why are we going through that? And so I think there's going to be a lot of workflows that become remove a lot of friction. I also think, you know, one of the I guess the closer experiences I've had just notionally to this was when we made Jon Favreau's remake of The Lion King. We did that entirely in virtual reality using a game engine. And I saw sort of some of this happen, which was, you know, John would bring the actors in, and it was all at a warehouse in Playa Vista. But we didn't have to strike a set. We didn't have to move on from a location. So John would start to watch these scenes and then say, oh, wait, I have a better idea. Or he'd bring the actors back in. I recall one specific time, you know, Seth Rogen, Billy Eichner came back in, and they looked at it, and they said, we think we have a better idea. And we walked them onto the mocap stage, captured it again, and that would have been impossible, right, in a traditional live-action methodology. And so, again, I think these things are going to be really, really liberating to artists. And I think, Lion King, I'll just bring it up, I think it's an interesting one also because as we have this conversation, you know, there weren't, you know, big crews on location in the savannah of Africa. We didn't make it that way. However, if you look at the end credits of Lion King, they're probably 17 minutes long. I mean, there are so many jobs of people who worked on that movie. They were just different jobs than had we gone and shot it.
I'm okay with all of those things, but I just want everyone to know that Tilly Norwood is not going to make me cry. And I'm okay with embedding AI into your process if you choose to use those tools. Or if your studio is mandating that the only way to achieve your story is by getting it down to this budget, and you are going through it with your team, and those are your personal and creative choices, where I think there are real red lines that I think we agents are, in particular, really having to be clear on is replacing human beings, is replacing artists, enhancing totally different story. I'm interested in that. By the way, some clients are not even interested in that. You're still going to have these purists who are going to want to hand paint their movies. Back to optionality, like having every tool at your disposal and choosing what you want to do, that makes you the artist, whether you want to use paint or crayon or, you know, whatever it is. But for it to be thrust upon, and I hear this a lot, like, you know, people will say to me, because I keep saying this to myself and sometimes out loud if someone will listen. I think when you tell an audience this was made by the machine, and there's like that AI sticker, I think it's less interesting. It's less exciting. It immediately removes emotional engagement, and then people will say to me, "No, you're wrong. Kids don't care. They did." But that's kind of back to my original theory, which is they don't care if that's all they ever saw. If they had no idea of what the real world was. They've never saw the real Wizard of Oz. They may not know, but it is upon us, again, to use these tools responsibly and to protect our culture, protect our humanity, and that's where that dialogue really is so essential, because maybe that does lessen some, you know, profitability, but in the end, it keeps our world intact, and that should be just as important every step of this. And I'm not sure that it is enough, and I think we have to be really urgent and draw lines and resist when we need to. It's important.
But Maha, I think
Don't interrupt my applause.
Exactly. I was like, more applause, please. But and I just want to add to what Maha's saying. Like, I think we all recognize authenticity. So, like, again, our kids do know the difference, and deep calls onto deep. So we had bad storytelling in the past, unaided by AI, and it didn't resonate. We have faster bad storytelling now, and it still won't resonate. I think that's a little bit of the problem. I understand, you know, that point, but I think we just have to say, like, great storytelling is great storytelling, right? Great performances are great performances, and I just want more stories to be made. That's kind of how I think about it, but it's a really good point.
And I agree with you completely on the synthetic human point. I agree with you completely on the optionality. If Guillermo del Toro wants to make every movie, you know, that without using any of these new tools, good for that. Great, I'm all for it. You know, it's if you know some of the artist made a black and white film. You know, it's you can do. Joe Kosinski wants to put cameras in real F1 cars. I love that movie. You know, I don't think, but there are other people who say I really love practical effects, and other people say I want to do that in VFX. I think it's all really what the artist can, you know, how they most, you know, how the best can achieve their vision.
I think this theme of responsible AI and how communities come together has come up a few times kind of during this conversation. I'd love to hear a bit from each of you on just what that looks like in practice. Maybe, Maha, we started with you and come down the line.
Can you repeat that?
So what does the doing responsible AI look like in practice?
Well, I think for us, from where we're sitting, we're, again, because we're speaking into every single company out there, responsible AI for us would be to back ethical organizations who are putting their artists at the front. You know, we have, we're working on multi-pronged issues, right? So we haven't talked about it, but it's also like, how do clients profit from AI? How do you know, we have something called a CA Vault, which we started a few years ago, and our clients were really skeptical of it too. We started it before they were ready to adopt it. She knows. And so we're always in the crosshairs a little bit, because if we go too fast, you know, we're supposed to be arm in arm with our artists, but we also need to look and see what's coming around the corner. So CA Vault was built in advance of people's readiness to accept it, and it scans our clients' likeness if they wanted to. They own it, but then they have their likeness captured, and we pay for that to protect them, so that if we're not at this place right now where we're transacting and doing business with, but we're this close to it, and so it's a lot harder to steal someone's likeness. Hi. She was my assistant. She just got promoted. So did she. Both of them. Yeah. Coordinator, a new agent. It's not something we're doing yet day to day, but we have to keep seeing around the corner, and that sometimes is a little uncomfortable for everybody. But if our clients trust, and I think that they do, because we are an artist-first agency, that we have their best interests at heart, then they will, I wouldn't say follow, because everyone has their point of view on it, but we'll at least know that our intentions are ethical and completely there to protect them. It's really hard to steal someone's likeness if there was a appropriate way to license it, and you can't just go make it yourself because maybe Margot Robbie's voice and likeness does exist, and you could make a deal with her that she approves of and gets behind. Sure. Hypothetical.
Yeah, funny. I feel largely the same. I think we also have to look at with these models changing, how do they change for the artists? And so we're hard at work on sort of what are new royalty and attribution mechanisms, not just for the work itself, but for any way they people engaged with these various models. We're trying to figure out are there new royalty streams? Are there new economic models where maybe the artists used to be able to own a lot of their work, right? It doesn't happen so much anymore. I think so. I think we're thinking a lot about that. I also think, and happy to be on this panel for a number of reasons, but one of them is, Hollywood and Silicon Valley, they just don't talk to each other very well. And I think we really have to do that. I really think we have to sit down together and sort of say, how do we make this work? These are the problems we're facing. What are you up to? And how do we I don't so far think the traditional Hollywood ecosystem has done a great job of leading right now, and I think that I think we have to fix that, and I think that involves truly conversations like this one.
Anna? The points that Maha and Sean have highlighted are so resonant. I do think it comes down to how do we let talent continue to make money? We're a society that is built on copyright protection. That's how the arts is flourishing. And if we take away the idea that you as an artist don't own your IP that you put sweat into, I think this breaks the idea of how does art flourish. And so, Maha and her team have been so gracious to invite us in for these, these trusted education conversations. And most of talent, whether they're the director, the actor, is asking, how do I participate? How do I get back my agency in the sense that I want to own a royalty stream, a likeness or, something before somebody else removes that agency from me. And so we're working a lot with folks who want to be proactive and say, maybe I will let you use my filters and my style. This is my shot style, and I'll let you participate in that. But I want to own that back to where's the IP. So again, hopefully this is like our drumbeat. But Adobe is so creator at the center. When we came out with our foundational generative AI models, we did have a choice to ask permission or not ask permission, and our leadership team felt we should ask permission. So every piece of data is licensed. A creator was compensated in that process. So we have approval in our training. Not a lot of people can say that. And so I think that's an important point back to have the conversation. Adobe was already in the conversation since we've been in the industry for a long time, but we need as an industry to raise our hands and say, this is what we all need at the end of the day.
Maybe second last question. If you look at history, almost every technological innovation has created some new form of content, right? So when the camera first came out, everyone thought, okay, this is useful for documenting scientific discovery, but no one thought it would be an art form. Radio becomes a thing, and everyone did radio versions of stage plays, right? You didn't expect anything that sort of came later with audio. Maybe Sean and Maha, if you think about AI, what do you think that could do in terms of new forms of content, new forms of content distribution, other sort of as yet unexpected ways that it could sort of take shape? Easy one.
No, I think this is really important. At Disney, you're sort of steeped in all things Disney, and many of you have probably seen the famous flywheel drawing of Walt's with the studio at the center, and then all the sort of. I think that can look. I think he'd build it differently now. And I think that it's actually tremendously exciting because your ability to engage with a world and with characters you love, I think is going to open up dramatically. I think the idea that you can fall in love with a character, but then you can have a different type of relationship with a character on different platforms, I think is going to be really, really exciting. We've done some experimentation in this place. And I think that, what sort of something that lives between the world of a linear narrative as we've known it and games, but it's not either. I think there's going to be some new platforms that are going to enable you to immerse yourselves in these worlds in ways we've never seen before.
Maha?
I don't have a particular, I'm looking forward to AI doing this. I'm interested in maybe discovering new talents that would not have been possible, human beings who maybe we wouldn't know about because AI, because of some innovation that they're using in AI that then come to the attention of us agents, and then we get behind that person. I challenged Tilly Norwood to make me cry at some point, but it's not. I don't look forward to it, but I just want to see if it could happen. I'm curious. But I think all of this is, filmmaking is a labor-intensive human thing. And when you really meet film people or television people, crews, they bond in this very kind of personal and physical way. They're not sitting around a computer with 5 prompts and then they come up with Dune. They've spent time in locations and someone's carrying heavy equipment around and, and someone else is cracking a story, and it's emotional labor and it's physical labor and it's very, very human. Now, if there's easier ways to do it or ways where it creates more jobs and enhances the craft, as I stated earlier, I'm all for it. But I can't really look forward to any of this until I really believe an ethical standard has been applied. I'm grateful to people who are stepping forward, like my friends at the Creators Coalition, who are bringing us all together into conversations from tech to all aspects of Hollywood. There's artist-driven companies like Asteria. I'm grateful to see that there are people planting flags so that there is that option of doing it the ethical way, because there's a real crisis of leadership. And I think that's true in the world, but it's certainly true on this subject, and it's going to affect all of us so personally in every single way. And back to what you were saying, Sean, and dialogue, bringing people together is the right thing. Now, obviously, we see the faces of those companies, and you're thinking, oh, what do they care? I just think life's going to be very lonely in the bunker. I imagine they still want to be amongst us, even if it's just for us to serve them coffee. I think humanity, is they need human beings to lord over. So, everybody has, you've got to find what every single person's stake in it is, and you speak to that. And I look forward, and I hope I get to be at some of those conversations, because, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about preserving humanity, culture, and protecting our artists.
Maybe to end with a note of just forward-looking optimism. If we came back in a few years' time and were to have this discussion again, what do you hope would have changed about the way the industry is engaging with or using AI? Maybe Hannah.
I will, give a +1 to Maha's. We have to talk about responsibility. Leadership has to come forward. I also think in a couple of years we shouldn't be talking about AI as a thing, right? It's like Photoshop, Premiere Pro. It's just in the process of what we do. That would be my big hope, is that we've gotten through that. We've thought about royalties and relationship around the IP, and it just becomes another paintbrush in the artist toolkit of storytelling.
Sean?
I would echo that, and I guess I'd also just love to say, sort of all of a sudden, we see new filmmakers emerging with daring stories that historically the system wouldn't let through. I'd love to see us, talk about Paramount in the 70s. Let's go back to some real big swings. I think that'd be wonderful for storytelling, and to see places like Sundance have these voices be able to express themselves however they want. But individual voices expressing themselves, I think, is going to be really exciting.
And Maha?
I agree with that. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think if this democratizes things and brings tools to people we would never have known about otherwise, I'm excited for that. I'm excited to be moved by those kinds of storytellers. And, it's a funny thing for us, because we're always chasing, us as agents, we're chasing what's next. And AI is going to make it very hard for us to really know. And that keeps our, I accept the challenge, to say.
Fantastic. Well, I think that is a perfect note to end on. So Maha, Sean, Hannah, thank you very much.